Good morning, everyone. My name is Jimmy Bashar with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the stakeholder call to discuss the 2022 Draft Policy Initiatives Roadmap. As most are aware, we've also posted the related 2022 revised catalog along with this meeting material, which I will hand over to Brittany Dean from our Policy Development Group and also our lead for this process to further elaborate upon. And I'm also joined here today by Brad Cooper and John Gooden, also from our policy group, who will also be presenting portions of today's presentation. As a reminder, this call is also recorded, as we do with all of our calls, for stakeholder convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen to recordings after the meeting. The recording is publicly available or will be publicly available on the webpage for a limited time following this discussion. And we ask that the recording and any related transcriptions not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And lastly, before I hand it over to Brittany, we will be pausing for questions throughout. To do so, if you aren't already familiar, you can raise your hand virtually by pressing #2 if you dialed in separately. However, we hope that you've joined through the computer and there should be a raised hand virtual icon to do that. To enter the queue. We will look out for any chat questions that come in, although we do prefer verbal questions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Brittany.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good morning, everybody. Before we get started, I thought it was best to go over the process in which the annual roadmap and annual plan is developed. This process is and when I say the CAISO and market and infrastructure policy planning process on how we determine what initiatives we're going to undertake for the next 3 years, as well as our plan and workload for the following year. This also is the process for how we're enhancing and evolving our ISO markets. We developed the roadmap through this stakeholder process, and the ISO, along with stakeholders, prioritize our policy initiatives and decide which ones we will undertake, as I mentioned, for the next 3 years and year. This process includes first updating the policy catalog, which Jimmy said has been the revised catalog. It was just updated right prior to this roadmap being published. That catalog is comprised of different initiatives that stakeholders, whether internally to the ISO or externally, request to have the ISO undertake and be prioritized during the roadmap process. As I mentioned here, it is a directory of our current planned and potential policy initiatives. Any new policy or potential policy initiatives are updated or submitted through this catalog throughout the year, but the catalog isn't updated every month. It's just updated twice a year. After the catalog is updated, the ISO takes an initial look at what is already planned or what we have committed to either through FERC, our boards, and stakeholders. And then from there, we start developing our roadmap and annual plan. Next slide, please. First, we're going to go over our primary drivers for how we came up with the initiatives that are viewed here on our policy roadmap. Our proposed drivers are increased resource load and variability. This is enhancing our day-ahead market and extending EIM entities to leverage regional diversity and provide West-wide benefits. The second is an increasing amount of storage resources we are seeing come through the queue as well as into our market. This is enhancing the ISO markets to efficiently dispatch those storage resources so that they may align with our operational needs. And the last driver is the economic and reliability benefits of greater integration of Western markets. This also extends the day-ahead market across the larger footprint and openly and optimally manage access to available transmission. Next, I will pass it to Brad Cooper who will discuss the first couple of initiatives for market design and regional markets.
Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, at the end of this presentation, we'll get to the actual roadmap. So I'm going to summarize the market and regional initiatives that are on the roadmap. First up is the extended day-ahead market initiative, which I'm sure everyone's aware is looking at extending the day-ahead market to EIM entities to provide a number of benefits. This year's roadmap reflects the high priority we're giving to getting EDAM in place for participation by 2024. So you'll see some changes relative to last year, where we've moved some things out to focus resources on EDAM, which has a very aggressive policy development schedule, completing the policy this year. And we had our EDAM kickoff meeting last Friday and went over the process, where shortly we'll be engaging a number of stakeholder working groups in a number of different areas to start developing the EDAM design. Next slide, please. We're also working on the day-ahead market enhancements. The Day-Ahead Markets Enhancements Initiative is developing a couple new market products to address the transforming grid, to make sure we have enough capacity in real time to meet net load uncertainty and real-time ramping needs that can be greater than day-ahead scheduled ramping. The Day-Ahead Market Enhancements Initiative is developing what we call the Imbalance Reserve market product, and it's also enhancing the RUC process to also schedule downward capacity in the event that forecasted load is different than what the integrated forward market clears. These are all intended to reduce the out-of-market actions that CAISO operators currently take to manage the net load uncertainty and the ramping needs, and rather do that through a market product. And then I'd also note that Day-Ahead Market Enhancement plays an important role in setting up the foundation for EDAM. There's several aspects of imbalance reserves that we think will be a critical component in EDAM. Next slide, please. Next year, we're also planning what we're calling the Price Formation Enhancements Initiative to help improve various aspects of our market pricing. Previously, we've called this scarcity pricing, but as you'll see, we added on some scope items to this, so we're revising the name to be more reflective of what we'll be doing in the initiative. The main focus of this will explore scarcity pricing mechanisms to ensure market prices incentivize accurate scheduling and bidding, to make sure we have sufficient supply under tight conditions. And this is also particularly important for storage. We've had a storage initiative going on, looking at state of charge issues, and we think improved scarcity pricing goes hand in hand or supplants the need for some of those changes to incentivize resources to be available in tight conditions. We will also explore system-level market power mitigation enhancements. I will note, though, that we're proposing to look at market power mitigation in EDAM to provide a better framework than the current EIM market power mitigation structure for both the day-ahead market and the real-time market. Depending on how that works out, that could feed into this system-level market power mitigation efforts in the price formation enhancements, or potentially obviate the need for further changes. But we'll see what develops in EDAM. We've also committed to exploring fast start pricing, so we will address that in this initiative. And then we will also be looking at several issues that came up in our recent MSC meeting focused on the ISO real-time markets multi-interval optimization related to storage. It had to do with dispatching for advisory prices that don't necessarily materialize. And we're planning on looking at some of those issues in the price formation initiative. Okay, next slide, please. Currently, we're conducting the Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Enhancements Initiative, the RSE, or otherwise known as RSE enhancements. That's due to wrap up fairly shortly. We just extended that initiative a little bit, but we're planning to bring that to the board right after the beginning of the year. The Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Enhancements Phase 2 will continue to explore some topics that we've been talking about in this first phase, but or that have come up and that we won't be able to get resolution to in time for this round, bringing it to the board early next year. And I would note though that EDAM will be focusing on the EDAM resource sufficiency evaluation and rules, which overlaps the resource sufficiency evaluation issues that we've been looking at in the first phase, and I guess probably some of these topics in phase 2. So this phase 2 will likely build on whatever is developed in the initial discussions on resource sufficiency evaluation as part of EDAM. Next slide, please. The Transmission Services and Market Scheduling Priorities Initiative is looking at a process to release available CAL-ISO transmission for use by non-CAL-ISO entities. Primarily, that's for wheeling. I noticed also looking at some relatively minor changes to our high priority export process, where entities can designate non-RA resources as supporting exports and they get a high priority. It's looking at some relatively minor changes to that, but the main focus is to develop a long-term process for external entities to be able to obtain transmission rights, or I guess I should call them scheduling rights, to be able to count on scheduling wheels, while at the same time having a process to make sure we're reserving sufficient transmission to serve CAL-ISO internal load. And this is a relatively new name to note. It previously was the well, I'm not even remembering the past name, but this is a new name to our, I think it was External Load Forward Scheduling Rights Process or something like that. Okay, I believe this is all my slides. I can stop for questions here.
Thanks, Brad.
It looks like we do have a question on the line. Let me go ahead and unmute you. You may go ahead, Daniel. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, thanks. Dan Williams from Customized Energy Solutions. Can you hear me okay, Brad?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hey, Dan.
Okay, good. Just a handful of questions here, and some I may save for later. But on the day-ahead market enhancements, so during the EDAM call earlier this week, or I'm sorry, last Friday. Everything's running together now. Um, uh, Mark talked about an adjustment to sort of the timeline or approach to DAME as being more concurrent with the EDAM initiative. I know there's going to be some discussion of DAME at the Market Surveillance Committee meeting this Friday, but do you have anything more you can kind of update us on how the CAISO is thinking about running those two initiatives in tandem with each other, over the coming months?
Yeah, on the roadmap slide coming up, you'll see we've extended it to roughly mid-year, which that's not set in stone, but our thought is that we do have a number of issues yet still to or details to work out in EDAM. At the Market Surveillance Committee meeting, we plan to focus on stepping back and looking at examining the benefits of the imbalance reserve product and having a discussion around that, and also focusing that discussion on what kind of analyses we can do to better quantify things. We're working on a number of analyses, but they're not entirely complete. So we thought the MSC meeting would be a good opportunity to go back and focus on, what the imbalance reserve product is going to achieve, and also its relationship to EDAM. We think it has an important role in EDAM, because we're getting continued skepticism, I might say, that of the need for the new imbalance reserve product as opposed to the existing practice of our operators increasing the RUC load forecast to get extra capacity to be able to meet net load uncertainty and real-time ramping needs. So we wanted to circle back on the benefits. I was looking back at some of our materials from 2 years ago, and we had quite a bit of discussion about the benefits of imbalance reserves and the changing conditions we're seeing that makes us think we need imbalance reserves. And in the meantime, since then, we've been focusing on various formulations of day-ahead market enhancements, and then various technical details. And it seems like it seems like we just need a refreshed discussion of the benefits of what we're trying to achieve, just to get everybody back on the same page, or at least to understand where we're coming from, before we get people to focus then on the details of how we would design this product.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So I appreciate sharing that. Look forward to the discussion at the MSC, but definitely, kind of developing kind of that holistic look at DAME and EDAM is definitely something that we've heard a lot are interested in. So appreciate that.
And then, and Dan, I should also add, we've gotten pushback on, for instance, RA resources bidding non-zero into RUC. Today they bid zero, and even RA resources bidding non-zero for imbalance reserves, and we've tried to make the point that will be important as part of EDAM, and people have perhaps rightly pushed back, saying, well, we don't even know what the EDAM design is going to be yet, so that's a little premature to have that discussion. So extending day-ahead market enhancements and running in parallel with the EDAM, or more in parallel with EDAM, we hope to finish it earlier than EDAM will allow us to coordinate what's developing in EDAM with day-ahead market enhancements.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it seems like even if you're able to, EDAM seems like it has will take more time to get through the tariff and implementation process for sure, but at least being able to line up the policy development and lock in design elements, next year definitely seems like it makes sense to have those two together. So that's good. Smaller question, I guess, on the resource efficiency enhancements phase 2 scope and timing. Is that pretty well set in stone now? I know there were quite a few comments that came in on the last proposal requesting that the phase 2 kind of start much earlier, maybe in January this coming year, and get more quickly to dealing with the uncertainty component and some of the other aspects of it. Is it just infeasible to start that work any sooner, or is it kind of more about lining it up with letting some of the EDAM resource efficiency discussions happen before moving on to tackle more of the EIM requested changes?
Yeah, none of this is set in stone. This is our draft roadmap. Even without the EDAM considerations in RSC phase 1, we were advocating to wait to start the phase 2 till we could see what the improvements were in phase 1. But then, as we've gone through the EDAM plan, there's going to be extensive RSE discussions in EDAM, in EDAM, we think that would likely test everyone's resources to keep up with RSE discussions in EDAM, and then a separate RSE discussions as part of RSE phase 2 at the same time. But again, we're still open for feedback. But everyone is resource constrained, and EDAM is very ambitious, and there's a lot of stuff to discuss in there, and that's going to use up a lot of resources.
Understood. The other one I had was on the price formation scope. I think Calpine asked at the 2021 catalog update meeting whether the ancillary service deliverability and reoptimization discretionary initiative might be able to be folded into the price formation initiative. Have you given any more thought to that potential?
Yeah, good question. We've a lot of scarcity pricing, in other ISOs involves co-optimizing reserves in real time, and then when they go short on, they buy more than the minimum reliability requirement amount of reserves, and then when they go short on the excess, that gets co-opted. They apply scarcity prices to going short on those reserves, and those get co-optimized with energy and hence reflected in prices. And our market does co-optimize reserves in real time, and the scarcity of AS does get reflected into prices. But the issue is that we only procure reserves in real time when we're short. Primarily, they're procured day ahead, and the complete day ahead procurement isn't reoptimized. So it's not as effective as it could be. It's providing scarcity pricing signals. The issue is, though, other ISOs optimize reserves in real time. They don't have the deliverability concerns that we do, and co-optimization of reserves in real times in our BAA, we think needs to be accompanied by locational reserves, because if the reserves are being rescheduled in every real-time market interval, that would be too much for the operators to keep up with manually to ensure they're deliverable. So the reserves would have to be nodal, or maybe not nodal, but some other different design to more sure they're deliverable. You know, today when they're scheduled day ahead, the operators have a day to go through and review the various resources that were awarded reserves, and they can reschedule them to ensure they're deliverable. So that is a real big project, and it's real technically complex, and it would be cutting new ground. It's a tough thing to tackle. So we've moved that out. You'll see on the roadmap. So in this price formation enhancements initiative, we're proposing to look at an improved real-time pricing, but through other means that don't require reoptimization of ancillary services with energy, always in the real-time market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And thanks for that extra explanation on there as well. Just one more quick one now, and then maybe another one later, and that's that in the some recent release user group slides, there's been this piece hanging out there for 2023 that they've characterized as CRR upgrades or replacement. Is that just a technology thing, or is that more tied to some policy changes that are expected to come?
Yeah, I know that there are plans to replace our CRR system, so that's probably what that is. We don't have any policy changes planned in coordination with that. Though I would note that in the future, a different CRR system would enable more policy flexibility. There's things we've looked at in the past that we couldn't propose because our existing system couldn't handle it.
Okay, yeah, and I've seen in the discretionary catalog there's some stuff on CRR, so just was trying to tie those together. So that's all for now. Sorry for the taking up so much time.
No worries.
There are no additional questions in the queue at this time.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Brad and Dan, for your questions. Next, we have go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. This is John Gooden. Good morning, folks. And thanks, Brad. Kind of segregated this by the sort of market design, regional issues and initiatives. And then we'll transition now, and I'll review what I sort of like to classify as sort of infrastructure and sort of resource and planning issues. So let's just walk through quickly the initiatives on the roadmap that are in this category. And then again, we will talk about at the end how this all fits together and timing on the roadmap. And also, many of these initiatives are already on our website. You can find those under our tab of Stay Informed and go to the sub-tab of Stakeholder Initiatives, and there you can learn lots more about most of these initiatives and their timing if you want to explore in detail some of that. So just FYI. Okay, so with that, let's kick it off here. We'll start with our Resource Advocacy Enhancements Phase 2 initiative. This has been an initiative that we've been working on as folks that have followed this since October 2018. We launched this. We actually had our Phase 1 part of the RA enhancements approved, which was sort of went hand in hand with our summer enhancements. Again, those were some of the planned outage substitution obligations, some storage enhancements, that minimum stated charge enhancements, capacity procurement mechanism for local deficiencies. So those have been successfully approved and largely implemented. So here we're talking about Phase 2 is ongoing on the roadmap. Phase 2 is really addresses two primary things, which is what do we do with flexible resource advocacy capacity? How do we format that, rethink that to align with sort of the changing needs of the market and what we're talking about in the day-ahead market enhancements. And then also some changes to must-offer obligations. A third enhancement in phase 2 is some bid insertion modifications for use and availability, limited resources, and conditionally available resources called CARs. We are taking a little bit of a slow roll, if you will, on phase 2 because we are, again, trying to go in lockstep with the day-ahead market enhancements, given that's a big component as we move to the imbalance reserves product and how our flexible resource advocacy capacity can support that product versus what we've traditionally done is try to satisfy that 3-hour net load ramp need. We want to transition to really support the day-ahead market and that imbalance reserve product. So that's kind of what's upcoming on the roadmap in resource advocacy phase 2. Jimmy, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so another initiative that we're just launching, this is new, is our central procurement entity. This is really intended to support the CPUC decision that establishes a central buyer called the Central Procurement Entity. Both SCE and PG&E will be central procurement entities that will procure local capacity on behalf of the CPUC's LSEs. What this initiative is about is really establishing the framework for a CPE, a central procurement entity, in the ISO tariff, developing that framework and enabling this construct to move forward both at the PUC and within the ISO tariff. So again, this is recently launched and more coming on this. This is going to be a fairly fast turnaround given that the PUC wants to stand up to CPE in 2023. Okay, next slide, Jimmy. Okay, this is an initiative that we're contemplating on the roadmap. This has not been released on our website at all. We're still considering this, but think that this may be an important initiative that we should discuss with stakeholders, and that's, again, looking at our capacity procurement mechanism and that authority and how we ensure that we have the right capacity and energy needed to meet the operational needs of the grid. This is something that I think we need to explore our CPM authority from time to time. This is an opportunity to do that, to look at the pricing provisions of the soft offer cap given how the grid has changed and pricing and energy has changed. And then, again, look at our procurement authority to address the changing operational needs, the net load peak, the central procurement entity, things like that. So I would couch this as a little more exploratory and really seeking counsel and input from stakeholders as to what we might want to consider in this initiative, but we do want to make space and resources available to consider this topic. Next slide, Jimmy. Thank you. Okay, this initiative is our ongoing efforts to enhance our ability to model and operate energy storage resources given their growth on the system. There's many things that we're looking at. Again, this is sort of a continuation of what we've been doing for some time, but really trying to improve the existing storage model, address the stated charge concerns that we have, particularly over the net load peak. And as you recall, we did get the minimum stated charge requirement approved by FERC, but that does have a sunset. And so we need to address how we might modify that and make it more acceptable to the storage community in particular, which was not particularly supportive of the minimum stated charge. So we want to re-examine that. Look at exceptional dispatch provisions, enhancements to our co-located resource model. And then as Brad discussed, there are some issues in the price formation initiative that deal with storage compensation and dispatch. So this is sort of a catch-all to just continue our march to, again, better improve our ability to manage, model, dispatch, operate energy storage resources. Gabe Murtaugh, by the way, is leading this effort. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the last slide under what I, again, sort of that infrastructure rubric is our Interconnection Process Enhancements Initiative. This is taking a look at really trying to improve the efficiency of our generator interconnection process and deliverability, allocation procedures to address the super cluster 14, I think it is, with, just the overwhelming number of solicitations in that cluster and how we manage that. And then also we're exploring broader reforms. Generally, some of that came through the 2018 interconnection process, what we call ITE initiative, and really sort of building on some of those to, again, make this whole process better, more streamlined, more efficient, and really seek stakeholder guidance and input on how to do that. So that is the list of major initiatives on the roadmap for these upcoming years. With that, before we get into the actual sort of mapping out of what these look like on a timeline over the next 3 years, which is next, I will open it up for any questions on these set of initiatives. Jimmy?
Thanks a lot, John. Very nice overview. I don't see any chat questions. I do see at least one hand raised, so I'll let Michelle answer that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute the line. Mark, your line is unmuted. You may go ahead.
Hey, John. Happy holidays to you and everybody at the ISO.
Mark?
Nowhere, I searched this document for UCAP. I didn't see it anywhere. Is the ISO still committed? Is it going to move forward with UCAP, or has that kind of been put on hold as well?
Yeah, we're definitely still committed to UCAP. That would probably come through what we sort of phased RA. We've talked about phase 2 here. But there are additional elements, as I'm sure you're aware, that we've talked about over the years that we are want to continue to discuss, like a portfolio assessment, for example. You didn't see that on here. These are elements that we'd like to continue to pursue probably in phase 3. Also, Mark, we are, talking about UCAP and at the PUC on slice a day. And so we're really trying to see where the PUC goes with this. We are going to be presenting some additional data about UCAP and the forced outage rates of the fleet. That is something that we've promised to deliver and present to stakeholders and CPUC participants. So that is imminent. But good point, good catch. We are still definitely pursuing that concept, but kind of waiting to see where the PUC goes and provide additional data to help inform their decision, and then we can decide where we go from there.
Okay,
so thanks for that.
John. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Mark.
All right. I do see an additional question in queue.
Go ahead.
Rayanne, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. This is Rayanne Quadro with Gridwell Consulting, and I just wanted to thank Mark for the comment about UCAP. That's something we're following closely too. My question isn't really about the IPE in particular, but I was just wondering, as you go into the next part of your slide deck, if you could discuss sort of the agility of your plan and updates throughout the year and the next, 3 years as things change. I know priorities are always changing, and the CAISO is trying to be agile, but we really struggled last year to track the updates, and I found that the roadmap itself was not updating, nor was the plan. Rather, I was getting the best and most recent information from MSC slide decks and board slide decks, so I'm just hoping that the CAISO has refined plans on streamlining those processes and making sure that there is one point of information that's the latest and greatest.
Thank you, Rayanne, and greetings. Definitely appreciate that feedback. Yeah, agility is sometimes a good thing to have and sometimes not if you're not keeping folks informed and things are changing rapidly, and that has been a challenge lately. So I'm going to defer that. I don't think you're necessarily looking for a response, but that feedback to Brad Cooper, who's our policy integration and governance lead.
I would note though that that last year, the last couple of years, we've started providing an updated roadmap in our MPPF presentations. So we've been trying to address your concerns. I guess there's still lingering concerns, but we have been doing updated roadmap presentations in the MPPS, and we did give an update mid-year to the board and the EIN governing body after we had made some significant changes.
Sure, and I appreciate that. And, I also am uniquely informed and understanding of how difficult it is to keep pace with the CAISO. So I don't want this to come off as a criticism at all. But it is difficult when those updates are coming forward at the MPPF or anywhere else that these documents are not also being updated. So, those of us who are looking for the latest information have to go out there instead of coming back to this policy. So I was just kind of hoping that you could commit to keeping the roadmap on that initiatives page updated in concert.
Oh, I see what
with
you're
those
saying.
phrases.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback. Okay.
Rand, this is Jim. We do our best to try to tie in those updates to the roadmap page, but yeah, we'll definitely check to make sure that it's streamlined as best we can for everybody. That's good feedback. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right. We do have another question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying that, do we have any additional questions?
Oh, yes, sir. We have one more. Alva, your line is unmuted. You may go ahead.
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Alva.
Great. Hi. Just on the energy storage enhancements, I was wondering whether long duration storage issues are also in the scope of that. I couldn't quite detect from the bullets whether that was considered as part of that. It seems like an area that will need more work.
That's a very good question, Alva. And I would say that the answer is no, not directly, but I think to your point that it's something that we should consider in scope, quote unquote, for this. I will raise this to Gabe because I think that is a very good point to see if and how that fits into what he's contemplating in this initiative. So I'll raise that to him, Alva.
Terrific, thank you. I think these issues that go across day-ahead markets and aren't in the scope of the capacity markets are still a thorny area. So it's good to keep an eye on them anyway. So,
yeah, definitely. I'm making a note right now to reach out to Gabe after this. So thanks.
All right. We do not currently have any additional questions in queue on the phone.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Brad. I guess I'll take this, continue on with the roadmap and the annual plan. Next slide, please. So our jargon here, the roadmap is what we call our three-year look ahead, where the annual plan is the plan for the upcoming year. And we have a separate slide for that just zooms in a little bit closer so people can see the dates a little more exactly. We've organized this by the different sectors, the same categories that we included in the previous slide, just showing market design, regional markets, and so on in the subsequent slides. So this slide, I won't go over every last little bar. What this is showing is the bar. For example, if you look at DAME, that's showing the timeline of the policy initiative ending approximately when we plan to take this to our board and the EIM governing body, and or the EIM governing body as applicable for each of the initiatives. The little arrow or chevron kind of thing on the left, that indicates that an initiative is extending from the previous year, or on the right it shows it's extending onto a subsequent year. Several changes, as you can see, as we've pushed out that AS deliverability, real-time reoptimizations we were talking about. We've also pushed out the frequency response measures initiative. That was an initiative, or that is an initiative that's looking at developing a frequency response product. I believe our VER dispatch enhancements initiative, that reflects a delay relative to previous roadmaps. Most of this was to allow for the focus on the extended day-ahead market initiative. Then, as an additional bit of explanation, the diamonds, well, it's shown up there in the upper right. The diamonds show the planned implementation of the initiative. And I guess one last thing to add is, we were talking about the plans for the resource efficiency evaluation enhancements. The arrow extending down from extended day-ahead market is intended to reflect that we would be talking about RSE in the extended day-ahead market initiative, and then we would shift the discussions back to the remaining issues in the resource efficiency evaluation phase 2. Then finally, I guess I should note that the transmission services and market scheduling priorities has 2 bars, because that's also in phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 is going on now, but that will continue for the rest of this year into next year for implementing in fall 2023. Okay, next slide.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so again, the initiatives that I reviewed, plus some others that are on our 3-year timeline here. So again, we have essentially our 4 sectors: RA, transmission, demand response, and DER, and storage. So issues that are sort of categorized within those sectors. Again, we talked about for 2022, the RA enhancements phase 2 as ongoing and really aligned with DAME and EDAM, and ensuring that we stay in lockstep with that and ensure that we get clarity through those initiatives as we inform, particularly the Flex RA capacity discussion. Again, we have the central procurement entity which we're looking at really fast tracking that so that we can be up and running in alignment with the PUC for the 2023 RA year. So folks that are paying attention to that, please tune in because that's going to be happening here, is happening quickly. Third and finally, for 2022, again, our CPM enhancements we talked about, again, exploratory, starting kind of, again, probably more second quarter where we would start to consider what things we should enhance if necessary. That implementation for late 2022, that's not, as we've thought about this, that's probably not necessarily realistic, so don't be overwhelmed by that. It'll probably be something that would be, for at earliest would be like summer 2023 or something like that. And then you'll see out there as well our MIC enhancements. Catalan on our staff has been working on that, implementing that in 2023. That initiative is pretty much wrapped up. So that's just showing when that would be implemented for 2023 for 2024 RE year. On the transmission sector, we have our interconnection process enhancements. You'll see that ongoing through first part of 2022 with implementation, hopefully, that's before fall, so perhaps summer or sometime in that time frame. That's phase one, and then there's phase two items as well, which will be 2023. So again, if you look at that initiative, you'll see that it's broken down into two phases. So pay attention to that, and this demonstrates the timing of those two. And again, more details on those phases and timing in the paper on our website. Under the DR and DER sector, we have our RDRR, our Reliability Demand Response Resource Bidding Enhancements. For those that have been following this is about, how do we address RDR bidding under 831 with a $2,000 cap and what that means for RDR resources. Also exploring commitment costs, minimum load costs, startup costs, things like that for RDRR. Again, that's ongoing. In the storage sector, the big initiative is, again, the energy storage enhancements. We have our hybrid resource evolution initiative slated for 2023. Again, that's kind of been pushed out some. Those that have been following that as to how we would continue to enhance our hybrid resource model. Again, that's going to be delayed some given just other priorities and demands on resources. And then the other storage-related topic, like Brad went over, was the price formation enhancements, which really falls into that market design sector that Brad talked about. So all in all, you can kind of see how these major initiatives I talked about fit on this timeline when the policy would be developed and implemented. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Brad to look at the specific 2022 annual plan. Brad or Brittany?
Actually, me. This is Brittany. If you go to the next slide, we will look at the annual plan. Thank you. So this is the roadmap condensed into just focusing on the year 2022. Previous to the color coding, there was no color coding for the roadmap, but there is a color coding here in which we are showing the major initiatives in green and the initiatives that we anticipate not to be a major uplift with workload or resource or policy changes are shown in blue. The arrows here, again, on the left-hand side are representing policy that has started and will continue through next year. There's a total of 14 initiatives we plan to undergo next year, with only adding 3 new initiatives. Those would be the Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Enhancements Phase 2, Price Formation Enhancements, and then the CPM Enhancements. The annual plan here is not indicating what dates are or they scope to be implemented. That is only reflected on the roadmap. But as you can see, as you compare the two, the bars here are only showing the policy development, and the way that they are aligned throughout the year is intended to ensure that each initiative can meet their intended implementation date, while the work for policy ends shown here on these bars. There is a significant amount of work after the policy has ended to getting those implemented, and that's done through a separate process. Again, these time frames are approximate and are subject to change, and as Brad mentioned, the annual plan can and so often does sometimes change as we need to assess our priorities as the year goes forward, but this is what we are proposing for the next year. With that, I think we can pause here for questions before moving on to next steps.
All right, we do have a question in the queue, and I'd just like to say as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question via WebEx audio, please click the raise hand icon, which is located on your WebEx screen above the chat panel to place yourself in the question queue. If you are connected to today's meeting via phone audio, please dial #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. And with that, I will unmute the line for Daniel. Daniel, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Dan Williams from Customized Energy Solutions again. This is probably just kind of a high-level question, maybe directed back towards Brad, and try and ask it as neutrally as possible. There's obviously a ton of work underway here, and probably not much room for other things to get done. And when you look out, or when I look out at 23, 24, it doesn't seem like there's really any space, clearing up there as well. But then I look at the, sort of the policy initiatives queue, and it seems like we're kind of in the same problem here as we are in the interconnection queue, that there's just more there than can possibly be dealt with. I think there's 57 items in the discretionary queue right now, and it seems like a couple more get added each year as more ideas come in. And just kind of going through each of those, some are exploratory, but many look like they have pretty solid reasoning behind them, and tangible benefits that could be there for the market or for market participants, customer costs, those sorts of things. And I'm just wondering if you can comment a little bit on kind of how the CAISO plans to deal with some of that over time, and how stakeholders should think about that discretionary queue and the ability to kind of ever get to a point where it can be winnowed down some, or where a number of those can maybe be grouped into some larger initiatives and kind of get cleared out, even though there's already so much on the roadmap.
Dan, yeah, good question. I don't know if I have an answer for you. Yes, I was reviewing the catalog the other day before we posted the final version, and yes, it is enormous. Obviously in the electric industry, this is a time of enormous change from the changing nature of the grid because of ranging from both increased VERS to increasingly tight conditions and more extreme weather conditions, and and all of that. What we try and do is prioritize things and focus on the most important things, with the realization we can't do everything, and the ISO has limited resources, as do stakeholders, and as does our our implementation resources. Not only just the ISO internal people, but our subcontractors that such as Siemens that works on the market optimization. I don't know that I can answer your question. I don't think we will. We won't ever be able to do everything in the catalog. What we try and do is prioritize and focus on the most important things. We're doing our best to fill in our missing resources, personnel-wise. We're down a little bit, and we're actively recruiting and trying to fill those. And even if the ISO were to add head counts, the feedback we get when we try and do more is that stakeholders don't have the bandwidth to keep up. Because all of this stuff gets very there are a lot of details to all of this stuff that takes a lot of effort to make sure it works together, and we have to focus on the most important stuff to get that accomplished. That's about the best answer I can give, Dan.
I think that's good, and I appreciate the kind of sharing of more thinking there, and also just to note too that on the budget call yesterday, and just noting that CAISO is adding some headcount. I think it was in operations and technology and stuff. That's good to see, and hopefully that will help with kind of expanding the bandwidth to complete some of these projects. But you're definitely right; it does also require a lot of work on the stakeholder side. So thanks for the additional thoughts.
Sure.
All right. I do not see any additional questions in queue at this time.
All right, then let's move to the process schedule. So we would like your feedback on our 3-year roadmap and annual plan by December 1st. After that, we'll take some time to review your comments and feedback, discuss with our management, see if there needs to be any adjustments to the roadmap before posting a final roadmap and annual plan, which we plan to do sometime in January. Then we will hold a stakeholder call. After that, we plan to present our final annual plan and roadmap to the EIM governing body and our board of governors in a joint session. This would be a briefing to let them know what we plan to undertake for the coming year. And I'll pause here if there's any questions on process.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, to ask a question on WebEx audio, press the raise hand icon, which is above the chat panel. If you are on the meeting via regular phone, #2 will enter you into the question queue.
Thanks, Brittany, and we'll give folks a few more seconds there in the queue. I just wanted to reiterate Brad's comments, and thanks again, Dan, for the question. We do try to run a very transparent and thoughtful stakeholder process. All of these comments are very well appreciated and duly noted.
All right. I do not see any questions in queue at this time.
Great. Thank you, Brittany, and Brad and John, and everyone's attendance and for your questions. And as mentioned, this was recorded. It wasn't the longest meeting, so I would think the recording would be ready probably tomorrow, if not Thursday. So once more, have a great rest of your day, folks, and we look forward to your comments.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.